and police hunt for those responsible for burning trains in Cape Town.
Recruitment agency Lulaway says 30% of youths will quit work within the first 3 months of employment. It says the reason that this needs to change, and it's important to understand the socio-economic context first. Well, Lulaway CEO Jake Willis is in studio for more. Jake, thanks so much for coming in.
Right.
I mean, so 3 out of 10 youth to quit their jobs within the first 3 months. It's a shocking statistic, exactly because the highest levels of unemployment are between that 15 to 24 age group.
What's even more shocking is actually the fact that the 30% that are dropping out of the employment pool are actually the sort of fraction that made it through. And when we say made it through, the number of people that sort of self-select themselves out of the employment space is absolutely astonishing. I mean, if we send, just the basic sort of stats, if we send 100 people that have registered for employment, we invite them for interviews, about 50% of them will show up for the interview. Once 50% of them showed up for the interview, a company will often accept almost 80% of them. However, when the day comes for starting work, you're going to find that a substantial percentage of those don't actually pitch up for work. Then when the guys actually start, that's when our stats kick in, you know, where 16% of them will drop out in the first month, and by the third month, 32% of them will be out of work. And, you know, with the 48% unemployment rate for youth, guys that actually got jobs are now sitting and self-selecting themselves out of the workplace. It's shocking.
So you're calling it self-selecting yourself out of the workplace. I mean, so you're given the opportunity, but you don't take it.
You're given the opportunity, but for whatever reason, you sort of come up with all kinds of reasons why, you know, this is not good enough for you, you're not good enough for that, or whatever it is. Obviously, there's also all kinds of, you know, sort of practical challenges. You know, if we're talking about transport, if we're talking about, you know, the distance from work, if you're talking about, you know, a lack of understanding of what the workplace entails. We find kind of at the core of it, there's the fact that young people don't understand that getting into the workplace is not a sort of, you know, you jump into it and you're there. You know, it's a process. You know, so what we find that a big issue is the fact that the guys come in and they say they'll start working at 3,000 Rand a month or whatever it is. Now, often transport will cost them a substantial, you know, amount of that. Now, they sit down and they do the calculations and they're basically, okay, so I was unemployed and I had no money. Now I'm employed and I have no money, so what's the point? But sort of missing the point that, you know, for the first year, 2, 3, whatever it is, that's what happens. But that's when you sort of make your way into the workplace, and that's when you start growing, you know, your earning power and your career.
How can recruitment agencies like Lulaway fill that gap, just in terms of, I suppose, emotional support on one level, and practical advice to these people who are facing such high levels of unemployment?
Yeah, so we use an array of interventions, and you know we're constantly testing new interventions and new ways of doing things. But at the core of it, we find that a lot of employers don't necessarily understand, you know, how to go about integrating entry-level youngsters into the workplace. So the value of a proper induction, you know, cannot be underestimated. I mean, these guys come in from school, they've got no idea, really. They've got no idea about what, where, and how. And just sitting down with them and explaining to them, guys, this is how it works. You know, they feel that if you deduct the taxes off their salary, you're robbing them. You know, they feel that if, you know, just because you stayed home one day from work doesn't give you the right to take away, you know, some of the money from their salary. You just need to explain to them sort of what the process is and how it works. It's also about just providing, you know, the basic logistical supports, you know, sort of if a person has a problem, who does he speak to, how does he go about it? Dealing with a lot of emotional baggage that these guys have, you know, where sort of they suddenly come in and they think that overnight everything is going to change, but it doesn't. And you've got to explain to them that, guys, this is how it works. We also, what we try to do is also sort of work with employers and structure employment initiatives. I mean, maybe just a basic, you know, just a basic program that we run, which is very interesting because of sort of all the players that are involved. So we run a program with Bidvest Protea Coin, where they take on security guards. And what we basically worked with is sort of the Ekurhuleni municipality funds a portion of the salary for the first period. The Bidvest Protea Coin come in and they take a group of hundreds, but I think the last group was about 150 people. They've got a beautiful training center in Walmansdal next to Pretoria, where they sort of take the guys and they keep them there for 3 months, room and board and all of that. And kind of the nice part about it is the guys almost don't have the opportunity to drop out. And by the time they finish the first 3 months, now they've already understood these things, they know what they're in, they've been trained, and now they could be deployed into the workplace in a much safer way. So that's just an example of how we bring different role players together to be able to structure a program that will take young people out of the townships and sort of put them, kind of shove them in a way into the workplace in a way that's really going to work.
Yeah, a great model and some great advice there to corporates who are employing this very important part of the population, this 15 to 4-year-old age group. Jake Willis is CEO of Lulaway Recruitment. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks, Michelle.